Hello and welcome to Voices of Victory podcast. I am your host, Mario Di Leone, and today we have somebody very special right over here on this other side of me, and that is Joanna Brandi. Joanna, I wanted to bring you on the show because we talk about everything in regards to leadership, self-esteem, confidence, mindset, and workplace related topics. And I want you to take a moment and just tell me, what is it that you do in terms of where you are in the grand scheme of things?
Okay. Okay. I work with leaders. I
Got
work with leaders. Mostly my clients are leaders that are really good and just want to be better. So what they want to do is they want to create the kind of culture where people want to come to work and do a good job. And if you've ever worked in that kind of culture, people show up ready. People show up wanting to contribute. So when the leaders set the environment of strengths, of growth, of happiness, of when it's fun to come to work
it.
because your work is engaging and your work is meaningful and your work has purpose, people want to show up. When they want to show up, they bring themselves differently to the relationships with the customers and with the coworkers.
That's awesome. I mean, I think the wonderful thing about what it is you're doing, what you bring to the table, is it's all about environment, but at the same token, our mindsets, the model, of our thinking, it really has an impact on all of that. When we keep our mind in a great place, it makes a great environment for us to work at. Would you agree to that?
Oh, I do agree with that. And I think obviously there's been a huge change
Mm,
because the old models of leadership came from the military.
mm,
I'm the leader, I have the information, I will tell you what to do, and you have to go do it.
mm.
There's still a little bit of that in the workplace.
I agree.
The new model is a partnership. It's power with, not power over. I think that's the most significant change that I've seen. And I've been in my own business for 35 years.
Mm.
So 35 years, I've been in and out of other people's companies. In the beginning, it was because they had a problem with their customer service. That's what
Yep.
it's known for, customer retention and customer loyalty. My first book was called Winning at Customer Retention 101 Ways to Keep them happy, keep loyal, and keep coming back.
That's huge.
That's business. You don't have a business without customers. Very very old fashioned thinking. Peter Drucker thinking. Without a customer, you don't have a business. So
Yeah.
you want to make sure to keep those customers happy, and you want to make sure to give them a reason to keep coming back to you and not to a competitor.
Yeah. I can completely agree. I think to add to that, a lot of folks say, well, don't we want customers to be satisfied? Actually, you want them to be loyal, right?
So,
Like you want to nourish that loyalty and have them coming back, take good care of them.
and satisfaction is a step.
Yeah.
Have
Yeah.
something the appreciating cycle. And at the
Mm.
top of the appreciating cycle is customer satisfaction. If they are not satisfied, they're not going to come back in the first place. So first they have to be satisfied, but once they're satisfied with whatever that first interaction was or the product or whatever, then you get the opportunity to create more value as you go around that circle. So once they're satisfied, you create more value. Now they become, now they want to come back and buy more.
You come back upon
So
more. Absolutely.
that's called customer retention.
Yeah.
So
Now,
satisfaction to retention. But if you continue to add
mm,
value, and now it's a different kind of value now, emotional value, then you get loyalty.
mm,
That's when you become my auto shop, my hairdresser, my travel agent, my supermarket. As soon as I put that word in front of it, I've got a connection.
yeah,
And you've
it's
got a connection with me that's going to make me go a mile down the road instead of ordering it online or going down the block. It, loyalty is complex because it happens inside the middle of the brain.
it's pretty wild. What do you think in terms of, like, okay, when it comes to happiness? what does happiness really mean in the context of our work environment? You know, especially post COVID, right? Like, what does happiness really mean in the context of our environment now?
Yes, and that's been such a difficult challenge because people hear the word happy and they think I'm talking about this. "Oh,
Yeah,
happy," I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about that. Happiness, and I never define happiness because happiness is what you think it is. But what happiness means in the context of work is that people are challenged appropriately.
mm,
They like what they're doing. They like who they're working with. So you would say they were happy to go to work. They're not getting up in the morning and going, "Oh shit, I have to go to work today." They get up in the morning and go, "I get to create value today." When a leader creates the right context for the culture and for the business, people want to create value because creating value feels good. But if it's never discussed, if people don't know how they add value or create value, how are they going to add more of it? Does that make sense?
right.
Sure.
I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. And this makes a beautiful distinguishing difference between people that may go to work in a passive way,
Mhm.
say, "Oh, I just want a paycheck," right? So what happens is they're not really aligning themselves with the mission and values of the organization and creating those meaningful connections, but not just meaningful connections, but meaningful experiences. Hopefully that made sense there. Yeah.
That's it. Meaningful experiences. But all of it, I think, depends on leadership. Now, there are some people, you were probably one of them, and I'm probably one of them, that when we get a job, we show up and we do the best that we can.
Yeah.
Someone doesn't tell us what the values are, we bring our values. If someone doesn't tell us what the purpose is, we allow ourselves to experience the purpose of why we're there. We don't have to articulate it, but most of the population is not like that. We need to
Right.
know that where we are putting our emotional energy is
Mhm.
important because this is precious energy that we have, and we want to know that there's a reason we're doing this. That's why it's important to connect people not only to their values and the values of the company, but to the mission, to the purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. I could definitely see the value of what you personally do because, me dealing with cultural strategies, happiness and the wellness and well being of the organization should connect itself to the actual culture. And when we do, people go to work and they have a different set of reasons for it. You know what I mean?
Because
You know,
we spend most of our lives at work. Come on.
yeah.
When you
I,
think about it, even entrepreneurs forget we spend way too much time at work. But even people that work 9 to 5 jobs, they're
mm,
spending huge portions of this. So their emotional energy is going into that work, or it should be. Their emotional energy is coming into that work. They need to get some value out. One of the ways that I've been explaining it recently, because I don't think people get that, the workplace needs to be energy gaining, not energy draining. There's a
mhm,
little quiz I have called Gains and Energy Gaining and Energy Draining to take a look at your daily activities and see which activities are giving you energy
yeah.
because they challenge you appropriately, because they're fun to do, because they put you in contact with people you want to be in contact with, they allow you to use your skills, et cetera, or energy draining. And that's when somebody doesn't really know how to manage people well and they suck the life out of you by focusing on what you're doing wrong instead of what you're doing right.
Yeah, I can totally agree because there's a lot of people that say, "Oh, I don't have the time. I don't have the time for this. I don't have the schedule for this." But and I know it comes down to the way the energy is being used. How I use my energy,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. How I use my energy and how my energy, and I think this is the issue right now with the younger people, in
Yep.
the how my energy is appreciated by the organization.
Yeah. Value.
Value. Do you appreciate what I'm putting in? Do you appreciate what I'm giving up to be here? Do you appreciate the fact that I left my children at home to
Mm,
be here at this job?
yeah.
Because we have to, that's the circumstance that we're living in. People are leaving their children in daycare to come to work. You know how hard that is?
Yeah.
How
It's
that
very.
hard it is to not be home to raise your kids. Maybe you're a divorced parent. Maybe it's just that you need those two salaries, but you're giving up something that matters.
Yeah, absolutely.
Organizations have to be more sensitive to that and give more to you. And
Yeah.
that's done with leadership understanding what people's strengths are and connecting those strengths to the purpose of the company that they're working for.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I couldn't agree with you more. But what I want to state to add on to that, right, is that when some of these organizations hear the word sensitive, they take it out of context, but it's really more about being receptive, receptivity, right?
Right.
To be open and receptive to it. Now, I put it in that context for the reason that when people see how valuable that really is in terms of the big picture. Now, my question I have for you is what was the turning point that led you to focus on your career on happiness and emotional intelligence in business? Like, how did you come into this whole playing field?
I I quit my job and decided to start a business that focused on customer care.
Mm-hmm.
How did I come to that? I was ready to leave the company I was working for. I needed to get out of there. There was a change in management and it was quite uncomfortable. So I didn't know what to do with myself. So here's what I did. I had established some really good relationships with my customers. So I called a whole bunch. I'd say I probably called 20 different customers and said, it's time for me to leave the company. I don't really know what I do well. So maybe you could tell me what I do. Just as simple as that. And everybody said the same thing. They said, you take better care of your customers in this industry than anybody else did, and everybody's out to beat you. So I sat back and said, okay, what do I do? I don't even know what I did. I just did what I did. So I quit my job and I started reflecting on how do you take good care of customers? Immediately, I started a newsletter. There's a lot of different ways you take care of customers. It took me a while before I settled in and then began teaching and training. I wrote a book, Winning at Customer Retention 101 Ways to Keep Them Happy, Keep Them Loyal, and Keep Them Coming Back. That got me on stage. That got me on stage with Inc. magazine. I traveled around the country and I did speeches all over the place. I did 15 ways, 22 ways, 27 ways. And I always had I was a big reader. So I had great examples of all my ways. And I kept refreshing them by reading, Inc. magazine and Fast Company magazine and all of that stuff. So I carried all those books down here to Florida to write that book
Right
on
down.
paper because we didn't have the internet when I did this.
I got you.
Yeah, so I carried them all down. So I created this brand of 101 ways to keep them happy, loyal, and coming back. And I never thought about happy, honestly, back then. I just wanted customers to be happy. But what that got me was a lot of consulting work. So now I'm in companies. I'm talking to the people who are taking care of the customers.
Yeah.
Inside of a few years, it became actually I became painfully aware of the fact that there was nothing wrong with those customer service people.
Yeah.
Problems usually existed in a policy or whether or not people had the right equipment or how they were treated by their bosses, especially in the call centers, where they had these things, there are 32 calls waiting for you, that. So after a while, I always ended up in the corner office, no matter where I went or what I did. Before I left, I'd walk in the corner office and sometimes I'd grab somebody by the tie, or sometimes I would just poke my finger in their face and say, the problem is you. The problem is how you are managing people here.
Mhm.
So I ended up with consulting work
Wow.
that wasn't customer service. So I started writing leadership programs. So I was already into it. I had a whole line of programs called Managing to Thrive because my thing was let's thrive. Let's
Right.
let's get beyond just taking care of customers. We want everybody to thrive. And then one day I'm here and somebody sends me an email and tells me I need to attend a teleseminar. And remember those? So I'm sitting in this very same spot and I'm at a teleseminar. The teleseminar was being given by Dr. Martin Seligman.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's a big name. Marty is
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
father of positive psychology. And the moment Marty opens his mouth, I got an electrical charge that went through the top of my head and followed me down 2 stories. And I was galvanized. And I couldn't get out of the chair. And halfway through, I said, shit, whatever he's selling, I'm going to buy. Because I just, so he started a program he called Authentic Happiness Coaching.
Mm.
I became an authentic happiness coach, which essentially took me out of where I was headed with customer experience. By then, the customer service industry had become the customer experience industry, and they were doing a lot of measurement. I wasn't interested in the measurement. I wasn't interested in the numbers. I was interested in the emotion and the people. So I kind of split from my industry, which from a positioning standpoint was a mistake.
Mm.
Because now all of a sudden I'm talking to people about happiness and they think I'm,
Yeah.
talking
Well,
about happiness.
well, I think what's really maybe, sometimes missing, we're talking about when people have that quick, fast perception, of somebody, they fail to really understand like Seligman's background when it comes to psychology. So this is not just happiness, but this is really the psychology. And we are in 2025 where mental health portals are needed, where wellness is needed. These are not nice to haves anymore.
Yeah. And
Okay.
I'm also certified as a chief wellness officer now. I did that last year. These are not nice to have because our people are under so much stress. And according to the Surgeon General, 84% of mental health problems are coming directly from the workplace.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. One of the things that I've studied, which is quite interesting to bring to the table, um, is the Yerkes Dodson law, which is a law from Harvard. Harvard did a study that there is a healthy amount of stress when you hit a point of no return, then it becomes the law of diminishing returns. So when people hit that highest level of stress point to where it starts blending into anxiety, blending into depression, it is a great rule to understand because it helps leaders and businesses differentiate between what is an acceptable amount of stress and what is not. And I believe, truthfully, and you might agree with me, is during COVID-19, people went past that point of no return, and we've got to experience it in our world for the first time that the stress levels were way beyond capacity. And I
Absolutely.
now that we're post COVID, we're realizing that the wellness is not a nice to have, and having a mental health portal as part of the benefits is not a nice to have. These are things that are mandatory, and it reinforces the culture and how it cares about people. And if they invest back into the mentality of the people, they could go to work and be more productive as a result. Would you agree?
Well, that's one of my biggest selling points for productivity. And that's what I've been saying a lot these days is that I help leaders create more productive, positive, and profitable cultures. Because productivity is one of the number one results of creating a positive culture. And that comes from a variety of things because when you understand the stuff I teach, which is the science,
Yeah.
science, when we are in a positive space, let's not even use the word happy, when we're feeling good about what we're doing, when
Well-being.
when we're in a state of flow, when we're focused and excited about what we're doing, the right hemisphere of the brain and the left hemisphere of the brain begin talking to each other. They
Yeah.
open. One of my teachers is Barbara Fredrickson, who's done all of this work on positivity. So when that happens and the two hemispheres of the brain begin talking to one another, we get more creative. So what we see is 3 to 10 times more creativity in cultures that are positive, and wait till you hear this one, 300 to 400% more innovation.
Yeah, absolutely. And that it's that when we are creative people and we hit a stress point, it is that emotional resilience
That,
that allows us to break that barrier and step into innovation. And I think that a lot of leaders out there need to understand that.
well, I think they do too, and that's why I'm glad we're putting this on film. I think they do too. I think we're still holding the mental models of the old ways of leadership. The companies that have younger managers, I love working with younger managers. I love working with younger managers.
I do too.
Oh my gosh. I was doing a workshop with older men. I work for, I have for 26 years now
Mhm.
been a provider, a speaker for this organization called Vistage, which is the world's largest CEO or peer group, peer-to-peer group organizations. So I've spoken to a lot of CEOs, and in the beginning they were all males. It's changing. It's really, really changing now, which is lovely.
Yeah,
And
no, yeah.
I'm not doing as much speaking for them at this point. I'm not traveling much at this point, you
Mhm.
know. But I was on a Zoom call one day, talking about all of this happiness and things like that. And there's one gentleman, older, probably closer to my age, and I'm watching his face, and he's contorting his face. And so finally, I called him on it. I said, "What is it?" His name was Bill. "What is it, Bill? What is it about what I'm saying that's disturbing you so much?" So I was talking about the 5-to-1 positivity to negativity ratio. And he just looks up, he said, "That's bullshit." And what do you mean that's bullshit? If I appreciated them that much, I'd have to give them a raise.
Mm.
So that set up a whole other conversation because that's not the first time I've heard that.
Yeah,
If
yeah,
it's too positive, or if there's no such thing as too positive, if you know how to be positive. Being positive doesn't mean saying your shirt looks good today or good
right.
job, Joey. I mean, there's a whole range of behaviors around finding people doing something right
Yeah, yeah.
and then connecting that to a larger picture.
I agree. And I think that what I can kind of like shed light on is that some of these leaders, these traditional leaders out there, right? Their mental model, their framework, their lens in which they see leadership and the way they see their workplace, they don't realize the direct impact that they're having just by limiting their sight. It's kind of like a horse with the blinders on. Is that I've always said this on the show, the more narrow the point of view, the more narrow your choices are going to be because you just simply can't see beyond that. You can't be expansive beyond that short range of choices that you perceive. So what starts to happen, and you would agree with me on this, is that when they're looking for solutions, they may not be able to find those solutions because it's a limited scope, it's a limited point of view, right?
That's right. And because many of them still hold, not too many, but some still, I should say that. I don't want to be unkind. Some still hold the opinion that I'm the leader, I should be the one coming up with the ideas, as opposed to I hired these really people.
That's great. How's that working for you? That's what I would say. How's that working? How's your bottom line? How's your revolving door of people leaving your company? You tell me.
Well, and that
Right.
that's really the telltale. Do
Right.
people want to work there? Do they appreciate working there? And
Yeah.
leaders, again, because I teach positive psychology, is a little bit different. They don't
Yeah.
want to spend as much. They leaders mostly don't want to spend as much time with people that they need to. They should be checking in with them once a month.
Correct.
What's
You know,
happening? Are you excited about your work still? What is it that you need for me to do a better job? How is everything going? All of those kinds of questions that make people sometimes uncomfortable to ask because they don't really want to know.
right. I agree with you, and I think another area here, right? Is another area of opportunity here. Is that some leaders out in the world, especially in the workplace, their concept may be in the back of their head that I don't want to be quote unquote anybody's shrink. I don't want to be anybody's counselor, right? They hit us with that attitude. But what they don't realize is that they don't have to. It could be embraced within HR, and HR can disseminate that to the entire organization, and they could simply adopt it and and kind of work with it, right? It could be in a more holistic fashion because they fall into that. They fall into that whole principle of oh, well, I don't really want to do that. Well, if you make it part of your culture and you understand it as a value and you support it within your organization, then guess what? You lead by example. That means you need to lead with that in mind, and other people will follow suit. I think that's a good point.
Well, that's why one of the things we teach, especially in my course, is emotional intelligence. People need to understand we have an emotional intelligence uh, assessment like the second lesson, and then we have it again like the ninth is 10 lessons, like the ninth lesson.
Mhm.
So yeah, people really need to understand what emotional intelligence means. And some people are very intelligent in lots of different ways, but they don't quite get there's a self-regulation portion there. There's an other, there's self and there's other, and how do you manage? Some people do very well with one and not the other. Some people manage themselves very well but don't manage the other one. That kind of a balance that needs to. We're just expanding our way of what we know leadership has to be in
Yeah.
order to be as productive and get people into that flow state so that they enjoy working, so
Yeah.
that we need their strengths. And it's really important that we find a way to talk about strengths in the workplace and what you bring.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, my question I got for you is your current role, how is it different from, let's say, the traditional leadership roles in terms of what you can bring to the table for other leaders?
Well, I think it has to, well, first of all, 35 years of experience right
Mm.
there, okay? 35 years of experience of being a very intuitive woman, and I will stress that. Having seen all kinds of situations, I would not give it up for the world. I always wanted a niche business, so everybody knew my name and it was easy to market and all of that. But life didn't happen that way. And after the exposure from Inc. magazine and Vistage, I worked for all kinds of companies. I
Yeah.
was working for a garbage company. You know,
Mm.
I spent years working for banks. So the outfit was different, maybe, but you just
Mindset was there. Mindset was there. Uh,
well, I think that my current way of looking at things comes as a result of my experience working with hundreds of people, hundreds of companies, and
yeah.
thousands of people, and listening to what they had to say. Here's a phrase that I started hearing over and over and over again.
Mhm.
Different kinds of companies, usually call centers, but different kinds of companies. How come they don't notice when I do something right, but when I do something wrong, they're all over me?
Mhm. Yeah.
And the addition to that was in public. So
Mm.
some people that said that finished there. Other people that said that they're all over me in public. So in other words, somebody comes over and gives them not even constructive criticism, not even constructive anything. They just
Not even functional.
get not yeah, well, they're telling them what they did wrong.
Right.
And
Yeah.
chances are they have never told them what they've done right. So the call center environment, especially now, of course, it's changing. Of course,
Mhm.
it's changing because we can't keep people in call centers. So it
Yeah.
has to change. It has to. Well, let's face it. A lot of it's going to AI because AI is doing a better job of dealing with people than sometimes people dealing with people. That is also a function of how we're trained.
Yeah, I think where it comes into play is that when we look at the concept of customer service, we also look at the concept of the, we'll say, the representation or the interpretation of the employee's happiness, right? Is that a lot of people don't understand the concept that they say, well, reality is perception. Actually, that's not entirely true. Reality that you interpret
Well,
is your perception. And if it wasn't true, customer service wouldn't exist, right? Perception is reality, but the interpretation of that is the reality. So when we get to the bottom of what our customers need, when we get to the bottom of what our people need, we start to go a little deeper. And we're not being so surface level, so traditional, following the traditional models. And we're in 2025 now. Something has got to give because we are dealing with younger generations that are moving in, and the way they react and respond is completely different. And you know what? They're not having it. They're not having it.
Oh, no, they are not. They're fed up because, just Google how to start your own business on the internet. You can go home and start your own business on the internet.
Right.
The thing that has to give, unfortunately, is customer service.
Customer service. Yeah.
I try hard because I know how the body works and I don't want to keep polluting my body with negative feelings or anything like that. But I got to tell you, I become a beast on the phone when I can't get anybody. When I've been hanging on, and now with all these cuts now, I mean, it just what it does to the human body when you're waiting. You got other things to do. You have to call the bank, or you have to call customer service, or
Yeah.
some because you have a thing on your list that has to be done, and you
Mhm.
can't get your call answered, or you've got to go through a phone tree that's 27. I changed insurance companies recently because I thought that company had good customer service.
No.
They're all cost cutting, cost cutting, cost cutting, cost.
Cost cutting out. Right, right. They're trying to come up with systems that are not so good either. I don't know if you've seen like some tech support. It's like, oh, you have to submit a ticket and it'll be 14 days till somebody gets back to you, where I know an organization that I actually work alongside with where they can actually video chat with you face to face in order to help you and walk you through their software. To me, that's value, being personable in that way.
Yeah, I think that we're out of service. I think we should be just hang on American business. We should just hang a big thing that says out of service because so few companies are willing to do. Fortunately, I'm working for a few that are willing to do it,
Right.
that are willing to train, that are willing to work with their people, that are willing to work with their managers who
Hmm.
work with the people who are on the phones so that they can create different kinds of experiences for the customers. Yeah, I think that's the thing that we gave up.
Absolutely. Now, how does employee happiness directly affect the loyalty of the customers as well as the business performance?
When you're having a great experience with someone, I mean, look what you do when you find the right car repair place. What do you call it? My repair place.
Right. Yeah,
My
it's my spot.
my spot. My favorite restaurant. My mechanic. My hairdresser. Oh my God, right? My hairdresser. That's my hairdresser. And for those of us who still like service, my travel agent, my whatever. When somebody starts using that term, that indicates loyalty. Now,
Yeah,
loyalty is an emotional connection
yeah.
because, and this is why I love science. Since the invention of the functional MRI, the fMRI machine,
Hmm.
you can now put people through a machine and watch their brain work because
Light up.
light up. And when you show someone a picture of their pet or their child or their mother or someone they love, a certain area of the brain lights up. It's deep in the midbrain.
Yeah, yeah.
When you show people the logos of the companies they love, the
Hmm.
same thing happens. So it's a different loyalty happens in a different place in the brain
Hmm.
when you've added so much value to the experience that someone says, that's my coffee shop. That's
Yeah,
my favorite coffee. Yeah.
absolutely. Now, when we say that happiness is like a business strategy, what does that look like?
It actually means two things. It means training leaders in positive leadership
Okay, awesome.
so that they can create more of it. And it means educating people so they can work with themselves
Hmm.
to create more happiness. I'm working with a group now. In fact, next week is our last meeting. We've worked together for a year and a half already.
Hmm.
And likely because this company likes to get customer service speakers twice a year and they like to change them every year. The
Yeah.
well, it's cool. The woman called me and she said, "I love you. I want you. What can you do?" So I keep rewriting programs and reorganizing programs, and we're now really getting down to the place where people teaching people how to manage their own stress. I'm
Yeah.
teaching people how to
Yeah.
take a breath. I'm teaching people the signs that their body is going to start producing too much cortisol. I'm teaching them ways to pattern interrupt
Yeah.
So that they're not
behavior.
constantly thinking, "Oh God, there's another customer coming in the door," because that's what they deal with all day long.
Yeah,
They
like, oh, they go again. Here they come one more time.
deal with complaints all day long because that's the nature of what they do. They have apartment buildings, things break, the maintenance guy doesn't get there on time, whatever it is. But
Yeah.
I'm teaching people now how to use their own bodies differently and
Mhm.
how to create a frame of mind
Yeah.
that goes beyond service. And I call it care, create authentic relationships with everyone we come in contact with, enthusiastically, energetically, and even exquisitely.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree wholeheartedly. Something I talk about a lot on this show, like anybody who listens to like a dozen episodes or so, which by the way, I have one episode on learned helplessness. I do have one of them, believe it or not. Yeah, it's got one of them, which is really good. It was a fun one. What I always discuss is that, you know, discipline is a practice,
Yeah.
willpower is a practice, but guess what? Happiness and well-being, it's a practice. And it's so needed. It is so needed in the
Well,
workplace.
that's why I teach positivity practices.
Yeah.
That's why I teach positivity, because if you have 4 or 5 positivity practices that you are doing over and over and over and over again, you change your brain because the brain, the neuroplasticity of the brain
Yeah.
means that neurons that fire together wire together. So by practicing these things over
Mhm.
and over again, you're creating superhighways in your brain. So you get to happiness faster. I we talk a lot about the happiness set point. The
Yeah.
hap-
Yeah.
we're all born with a happiness set point. We are.
Mm.
Some of us are happier than others.
I agree. It's I've said this in customer service quite a few times. Actually, I said there are some people out in the world you could give them gold on a plate, and no matter what you do, they just want. Now we may be referring more to customers, but not always employees, but it's employees as well. We all fall into that habit trap, of kind of falling into our habitual traditional patterns that backslide us into negativity. It's called the downward spiral. You probably have heard that before, right?
Okay.
Um,
But the
yeah,
thing I'm teaching people is that you can outsmart your happiness set point.
mm,
There are ways to outsmart the set point. And even after you've outsmarted it,
mhm,
because I'd say I've done a pretty good job over the past few 20, 30 years of outsmarting my happiness set point. I'm not always an optimist. I am not always happy. Now, the difference is that once I am aware of what emotion I'm feeling, I
mhm,
can quickly flip it
yeah,
because I know that unless you outsmart your happiness set point, you're not going to be any happier than you were as a kid. I was not a happy kid. I was not a happy baby. All of that. So we know this because it's been studied for 20, 30 years now.
yeah,
So outsmart
absolutely.
your happiness set point, which is what I'm teaching people to do, and you can have a better life. Period.
Yeah, I agree. And a lot of what we learn in work can trickle out into our lives. It's not unheard of that people go to a new job and a job that helps them step into actualization, where they grow, they learn new skills, and they actually take those things to the next job, the next workplace, and they don't realize how much they've grown as a result. And I've seen organizations that help actualize, and you know what they all have in common?
Uh,
Very strong culture, set of values, and a mission statement.
Absolutely.
Okay, like all of those things right there. Okay, combined. Now, my next question, this one's a great one. I think you're going to love this one. Is many leaders struggle with the balance performance with positivity. What's your advice to leaders who worry that happiness might soften results?
Oh well, I just hit him with a lot of statistics.
Stats,
We
yeah.
have a ton of statistics, and besides that, I just say try it, practice it, see what happens.
Yeah, it is a practice.
See what happens when people begin practicing it. When
Mhm.
you start looking for what people do right, when you shine the light on what is right all the time, people grow. People want to do more of it because it's positive attention.
Yeah.
So I don't have to talk people into it. I just have to give them examples and then say, just go try it. You have to practice it.
Yeah,
You
you
have
do.
to practice it.
Now, in terms of some of the stuff that you share out there, how can the small ritual changes or small micro practices help with the happiness? What are some of those things that folks can do, the small little things that kind of formulate the pattern, the habit?
Well, one of the things that I teach, especially to CEOs, is a practice
Hmm.
of looking for more things that are positive. So it's an assessment of it's appreciate. I call it an appreciation audit.
Yeah.
Several times during the day, preferably when you're doing something else. Like, how many times during the day do you fill your water glass? Okay,
Yeah.
because we're all supposed to be drinking more water.
Absolutely. Hydration.
Hydration. So when you fill the water glass,
Yeah.
take a moment and think of 5 things you appreciate.
Yeah. I agree.
Write them down. In the beginning, you have to write this stuff down. Now, do you do that every time you drink water? Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. I like that.
And do you need to find 5 different things every time? Yes.
Yeah.
So what begins to happen for the CEOs that are brave enough to actually do this, I've had 2 of them, their whole view of the world changes because after you've covered your family, your dog, your golf game, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera,
Yeah.
start looking for new things to appreciate.
Yeah.
So you're building those new neural pathways and you, oh, look at the quality of the color of the sky today. You start finding more and more things to appreciate. One of the
Yeah.
things I appreciate is that I live in paradise. So when I go out and take a walk, I pay a lot of attention to the greenery. There's a lot of orchids. There are a lot of blooming flowers. There are there are mango trees that are almost ready to ripen. I spend a lot of time
Hmm.
appreciating all of those different parts of nature. Now, I know when I do that,
Hmm.
flooding my body with dopamine, with oxytocin, with serotonin,
Melatonin and epinephrine.
with endorphins, with all the good stuff that's
Hmm.
going to help me heal, that's going to
Yeah.
help me stay healthy. I know that when I get into that state of positivity, my body is creating T cells which fight off the germs. So when you have the knowledge of what you're actually doing inside here
Hmm.
by doing what looks like a soft practice out there,
Yeah.
and when you do it and do it consistently, you feel better, you look better, you digest better, all of it.
Yeah, even on a chemical level, what you said was really valuable because when we experience cortisol, it's that stress. When we start to dive in to the mindset that produces the other chemical, it counteracts that same problematic chemical in the body, cortisol, right?
And what people don't know about cortisol, and one of my young students last week, her eyes were rolling back in her head because she came up with this. She asked the question. She said, "Can you tell me whether or not cortisol makes you fat?" And I said, "Oh, cortisol makes you fat. That's for sure." So I went through when you go through the science, even if people don't like science or they
Mm,
thought they were bad at science, here's
yep.
what happens. When we perceive something negative, because the hard drive hasn't been upgraded in 250,000 years, when we see something that could possibly be a threat, our body pumps out about 1,400 chemicals
Mm,
that are designed to shut down all the systems so that we can run or fight. It's fight or flight. We can run, we can freeze, we can do whatever we need to do to not get eaten by that beast.
yeah, I agree.
If you don't do something within 5 minutes, 5 minutes to turn that around, like by saying, "Oh, that was so silly of me. That wasn't danger at all," right?
Yeah,
Your immune system, all of your digestive functions, your immune functions, anything that's going on in the body shuts down for 6 to 8 hours. So one of the reasons COVID, I is purely my personal opinion, why
mm,
COVID was so dreadful and so deathful and so horrible is
mhm.
all we talked about was the negative. How many people died?
Yeah,
How many
yeah, yeah. The numbers were counting and everything, and Yeah, and it's not to say that it didn't happen or we should like, ignore or turn a blind eye. That's not the case at all. I think what happened is we really fell into that mode, that hardwiring traditional habitual pattern mode, and it was difficult. Plus we have to consider, and I'm sure you would agree on this, what we're putting into our mind daily, what we're consuming mentally is actually going to have an impact. Now we kind of ignore that as a component because lots of folks have their head in the news 8 to 10 hours a day, just looking at the same thing hour after hour after hour. And everybody went into social media and started experiencing it. We became the ultimate information consumer, and that can create not only fear of missing out, but create high levels of anxiety as well.
Well, it also shuts your immune system. If you watch more than 20 minutes of TV a day, you shut your immune system down quite effectively for about 6 to 8 hours. So there's a lot of science around this. Now, it's a little difficult right now and
Yeah,
not
to do it. Yeah, do it right now.
right now it's a little difficult because there's so much at stake. But yeah, but we have to be really careful where we put our attention.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah,
Absolutely. I'd like to. One of the things I've been mentioning on the show repeatedly is the next commodity is human attention, right? That's kind of like why, if that wasn't true, marketing wouldn't exist, right?
the now commodity.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Why don't
Now, my
we
oh,
want attention? Why are we doing this? We want attention,
we want
right?
attention. Yeah, I agree. I agree. Now, in terms of an organization, a company cultivating a culture of happiness, where do they begin? Of course, they're going to hire you, but where do they begin? What happens next,
Well,
right?
there's so many, there's so many books out there now. There are so many courses out there now. It's not hard to find anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
There are conferences, there are websites, there are so many new books, and I got most of them on my living room chair. Uh, all kinds of stuff. Albert Brooks is speaking at Harvard. He's got tons of stuff on the web. You don't have to go far at all. Laurie Santos has podcasts. If you want to learn how to create more happiness in your life,
Mhm.
you just have to look at your phone and type some happiness, the happiness lab in, and you're going to find a ton of information which didn't exist 20 years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
We now know what works. It was experimental back then, but we now know what works. We now have a boatload of evidence. If you want to get happy and you can't figure out how to get happy, I think that's your problem.
Yeah,
If
absolutely. How do the organizations, how do the companies measure like the ROI or return on happiness? How do they figure that out?
there are different tools. I represent a research tool that's quite wonderful, and it helps organizations figure. It's all about the culture.
Hmm.
You can do the research the way the research I represent. You can do the research 12, 15 times a year if you want to. It's not a one and done. The
Hmm.
tool allows you to keep going back and asking those questions, and it's really about has your manager given you enough attention? Has your that kind of stuff. Have
Okay.
last week has somebody told you what a good job you did? Are you a coworker? Do you have good relationships with your coworkers? There's all these kinds of questions that people can ask, and you can design it. So there is research, and happiness can be measured as a KPI.
Yeah, I agree.
Now
Uh,
we know that. If you're not doing that, well, that's up to you.
yeah, yeah.
Can be measured as one of the things you measure. And I think the companies that are not willing to do that, because they think a lot of companies think uh, tracking engagement is the same thing as tracking happiness, but it's not the same thing.
Absolutely. And just for my listeners out there who may not understand the word KPI, key performance indicator as it relates to happiness in the workplace. Now let's talk burnout. That's another fun topic. Burnout. How does a culture of happiness prevent that?
By nourishing people,
Yeah.
by giving them worthwhile work to do, by giving them the time to do the work, the tools to do the work, the vision for the work, by having positive leaders.
Mm.
You can prevent burnout, but you have to pay attention to it first. You have to be aware. Right now, I'd say for the most part, our nervous systems are fried.
Overloaded, right? Like literally
Oh,
cognitive overload 101.
we are so overloaded.
Yeah.
So can we, and these are some of the practices that the companies I work for put into play. Can our 1 hour meetings be 55 minutes? Can we create a space where people can get up and take a walk and shake off the tension of the day? Can we have good food in our cafeterias instead of
Yeah. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
stuff
Yeah.
full.
Non-nutritious
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. A great story. And then I need to talk to you about going because
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have a client project. We are not even through page one yet, and we're having
Ah,
fun.
yeah, it's all good. Well,
So,
I have two more questions and then we're done. If you want to wrap it up, we
oh,
can do
okay,
that.
I thought you had to go
Yeah.
slow.
Yeah, I kind of jumped a little bit forward, but that's okay. This is, we're gonna have some fun.
Take this
So,
piece.
yeah, the number 14, and I'm just gonna kind of tweak this question a little bit. If there's a toxic workplace or people use the phrase like toxic positivity, how do we reclaim agency in the sense of, choosing to move towards positivity, right? How do we dispel those two terms?
Well, I think we first have to figure out what's going on and who's doing it.
Yeah.
Toxic positivity is a term that relates to people who I only have body movement. I'm Italian, you know that, like you are. Yes, this is
Yeah.
toxic positivity. People who are not really genuine
Hmm.
in their expression of something positive. Of course, it's toxic.
Yeah.
People that overlook problems by putting a happy face on it or a sticker. That's
Right. Yeah,
positivity.
you still have to feel your emotions at the end of the day. I mean, you have to feel your and pivot from there. You move from there. Yeah.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Now, toxic cultures are something very different
Yeah.
because there's a spillover from, I talk about the positive spillover, but there's also negative spillover.
Hmm.
Years ago, I worked as a volunteer for the aid to victims of domestic abuse. In the population that we were dealing with there,
Hmm.
a lot of the times the women got beaten up because the husband had a bad day at work.
Hmm.
Because in his work environment, he was demeaned, demoralized, put down, cursed at, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then when he got home, the energy built up to the point where he just wanted to smack somebody, and he smacked his kids or he smacked his. This is not unusual because
Hmm.
energy needs to move like that. So that's a negative spillover. That's a negative spillover. You don't notice me doing a good job. I leave. I don't feel good about myself. I'm not going to go home and take care of my kids the right way. But
They're bringing it home, right? They're taking it home. Their whole experience is going home with them.
to the highway, they're out cutting people off on the highway.
Hmm.
I had
Yeah.
a situation yesterday where I'm leaving the doctor's office. I'm driving on a straightaway to get out of the parking lot, and some maniac comes at me from the side.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I didn't even tell. I didn't know what to do. I slammed on my brakes,
Yeah.
and
You responded.
I, well, he starts screaming at me.
Yeah.
And then I got out of the car to calm myself down and to kind of try to figure out, did he actually hit me? I hit my brakes so hard I couldn't tell if I was hit from the outside or whether or not I was shaking from that, you know. And the man got out of, he drove a little way away, got out of his car and started screaming at me. Put his arms up in the air, started screaming at me. You're not hurt. Go home. I'm like, what the
Yeah.
heck? But the negativity travels, and you know that.
Yeah. You take it home with you. Yeah.
All emotion travels.
Yeah. And if it doesn't come outside of you, it goes internal, it impacts your health, right? It goes impacts your health as well, right?
There's a new speech I'm writing. It starts off with, there are more heart attacks on Monday morning at 9 o'clock than any other time of the week.
Yeah. They don't die on Friday. They die on Monday, right? Not to heap scorn or make fun, but let's face it, right?
So yeah,
Now,
there's toxicity, but there's also positive spillover. And
yeah.
In my CEO workshops, I have a map. It's a future map. And it
Mhm.
starts out by a little circle in the middle that says positive culture.
Mm.
And it has all these other little bubbles, all these other little circles. So what does positive culture bring you? Well, it brings you more positive employees. Well, what do
Mm.
positive employees bring you? It brings you more positive, you know, and it keeps going out and out and out. And
Start expanding it.
and yes, because if you really look at it, when you create
Mhm.
positive culture, everything is impacted. Your relationship with your investors, your relationship with the neighborhood, your all of your other relationships. And again, positive psychology has done a really good. It's a ripple effect.
Yeah, absolutely.
I call
And
it positive spillover.
one last thing. First of all, I just want to say thank you. A, thank you for coming on the show. B, how can people reach out to you if they want you to visit their organization, to have a workshop, to get training, to impact the broad spectrum of all their employees? How do they
Absolutely.
reach you? How do they find you? How do they reach you?
Well, they can very simply reach me on my website, which is returnonhappiness.com. They can reach me on LinkedIn. They can reach me on Facebook, although I'm not on Facebook as much, but
Mhm.
I'm on all the social channels, so they can reach me there. Then they can reach me on my course site, which is positiveenergizer.com.
Mm, that's
And
awesome.
of course, my email is joanna at returnonhappiness.com. So that's a real easy one. Just pop into my mailbox and say, I want to talk more about this stuff. And as you can see, I love talking about it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Well, again, I want to thank you for coming on the show. I want to thank you for taking the time out because, again, this channel is all about emotional intelligence. It's all about victory. It's all about workplace. And you know what? Empathy is an amazing trait to bring to the table nowadays. It is underutilized. It is misunderstood, misrepresented. Uh, and you know what? You're doing something beautiful for the workplace. The way in 2024 and earlier, we can no longer operate that way. Leadership can simply they don't. It's not a thing anymore. They have to let go of the old ways of doing it. This is a new era, new generations coming in, and we have to take a new approach. So I just want to thank you today for that.
Now, let me just tell you a very quick
Yep.
story. I just did an interview with one of my clients, and she is so grateful because the skills she learned in the positive leadership we have I do positive leadership courses and then wisdom circles, so we all gather together and talk about what they learned and we take it another level. She has her relationship with her children have changed, her relationship with her husband has changed. One of the tools that she learned there helped her get through her mother's illness and death. It's so amazing how, when she explains what positive spillover is, it has completely changed her life and the lives of the other people I trained. So that's why it's important, because emotions are contagious.
Absolutely. Healing is impact. Having that healing impact is absolutely huge. And that's the thing is that when you do your training with people in different companies in the workshop, they take those things home. And what the organizations may not realize is that's an investment because they're coming back to work tomorrow
Yes, and they're coming back to work tomorrow in a better
in
state.
a better state.
Oh, well, when you go home with an energy drain, then where are you going to get the energy from? You're going to work drained the next day. But when you come home with those energy gains, you show up the next day to do a good job again. And that,
Absolutely.
thank you so much for having me. I know
You're,
you
you're welcome. You're welcome.